Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. I broke the news on our channel that the Biden administration is working on a $3 trillion, yes, a $3 trillion infrastructure plan, the Build Back Better agenda, which is designed to modernize our infrastructure, our roads, bridges, airports, our internet, our schools, and help set up clean energy for our future. And this is designed to create millions of new jobs. Now, no one ever said this was going to be easy. No one said this was not going to be controversial, but we can all agree that this is an extremely bold vision for the future, and we all want our country to succeed. Honestly, for me personally, it doesn't matter whether the best ideas come from the Republicans or the Democrats. I just want our country to move forward. For me, it's not about the red or the blue. It's about the red, white, and blue. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm American first. In fact, let's show you this article on your screen that was published by the Washington Post. The White House prepares a massive infrastructure bill with universal pre-K education, free community college, and climate measures. This is a big bill with many different aspects to this infrastructure bill that is now being drafted in the White House as we speak. According to new reporting from the Washington Post, the effort is expected to be broken down into two parts, one focused on infrastructure and the other focused on other domestic priorities like universal pre-K, national childcare, and free community college tuition. Now, many details of the plan were reported by the New York Times, and I'll provide you with a link to the New York Times article as well. But basically, these talks are in flux right now, and we can expect a formal announcement in the next couple of weeks. So what does this infrastructure plan include? The infrastructure part of the plan includes hundreds of billions of dollars for repairing the nation's roads, bridges, waterways, and rails. It also includes funding or retrofitting buildings, in other words, making buildings stronger, reinforcing them, making them more climate friendly, retrofitting them with high-speed internet, improved climate, improved circulation, which is important in a pre-pandemic world, safety improvements, school infrastructure, and money for low-income and tribal groups, as well as $100 billion for schooling and education infrastructure. In addition, there's going to be $400 billion for climate change, including $60 billion for infrastructure related to green transit, in other words, clean energy, presumably electric vehicles and electric buses, and $46 billion for climate-related research and development. The plan will also make electric vehicle charging stations available throughout the country, and the measure would include $200 billion for housing infrastructure, including $100 billion to expand housing for low-income Americans. Now, what is surprising, folks, is that while all of this is happening, the former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers called this the most irresponsible, actually he called it the least responsible, the most irresponsible economic policy in the past 40 years. Yep, that's what Larry Summers said. Clearly not a fan of all of this spending. In fact, speaking of spending, here's another headline on your screen from Bloomberg. Biden team weighs long-term economic plan of up to $3 trillion. It's going to feature infrastructure, which I mentioned. It's also going to include a lot of tax hikes, presumably for individuals making more than $400,000 a year. We are going to see an increase in corporate taxation based on what we've heard so far from the Biden administration. The corporate tax rate, which was reduced from 35% down to 21% by former President Trump in the 2017 sweeping tax cuts, is now projected to go back up to 28%. And the plan would also further education and healthcare measures, like I mentioned earlier in our video. You'll get a link to this Bloomberg article in the description section below. So make sure to check it out, and make sure to check out all the references that we list in our description section. Now, before we get to Larry Summers, the former US Treasury Secretary, let me show you the New York Times article that I promised earlier. I did actually break the news about this article on our channel, and I was the one who provided the scoop on our channel about the $3 trillion infrastructure plan. If you want to check out this New York Times article, the Washington Post article, the Bloomberg article, check out the links in the description section below, and then you'll be able to read those articles for yourselves. Now, let's shift gears to the former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who's extremely concerned about all of this stimulus. He's extremely concerned about inflation. And let's take a look at specific comments from him. In fact, here's what Summers said to Bloomberg News. He said, what was kindling is now igniting. He's extremely concerned about inflation. He said that the recovery from the pandemic will create a lot of demand, which will cause the prices of goods to rise. He's talking about, a gallon of milk costing $7, $8. He's talking about, simple items at the grocery store costing more money. I want to be as clear as I can. It is my belief that we are not likely to see this happen, because before this happens, the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury have many tools at their disposal to prevent that from happening. But this is what Larry Summers is concerned about. He said the Federal Reserve has stuck to its guns in committing to loose monetary policy, in other words, keeping interest rates low. And in some of the most damaging comments as far as the Biden administration is concerned, Summers said this: these are the least responsible fiscal macroeconomic policy we've had in the past 40 years. It's fundamentally driven by intransigence on the Democratic left and intransigence and the completely irresponsible behavior in the whole of the Republican Party. Basically, Summers is saying that with former President Trump's tax cuts in 2017, the Republicans basically cut out a key source of income for the US government by lowering the corporate income tax rate from 35% down to 21%. And now, under President Biden, what he's saying is we are seeing a whole new wave of spending, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. What happens to a business when you reduce income by cutting taxes and when you increase expenses? Well, first of all, you have two completely opposite approaches because of two completely opposite administrations. But when you have a reduction in tax revenue and you have an increase in expenses, you have a recipe for disaster. And that's why he's talking about the least responsible fiscal macroeconomic policy. It's a fancy way of saying the most irresponsible economic policy. Let's roll the tape and hear important comments from the former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and let's hear what he had to say. Let's roll the tape.
The COVID recovery has accelerated, which is a very good thing, but means more demand pressure. And the Fed has stuck to its guns on no rate hikes for years and years and continuing to grow its balance sheet. So it seems to me that what was kindling is now igniting. And I am much more worried that we'll have either inflation or we will have a pretty dramatic fiscal monetary collision.
Are we mishandling macroeconomic policy right now in the United States?
I think this is the least responsible macroeconomic policies we've had in the last 40 years. I think fundamentally it's driven by intransigence on the Democratic left and intransigence and completely unreasonable behavior in the whole of the Republican Party that's driven us to the kind of political deals that we're seeing, and they're understandable. And I understand why reasonable people, given the tragic choices they have, might make these kinds of macroeconomic choices. But I think we are running enormous risks. I would put the risks this way, David. I think there's about a 1/3 chance that inflation will significantly accelerate over the next several years and will be in a stagflationary situation, like the one that materialized between 1966 and 1969, where inflation went from the range of ones to the range of sixes. I think there's a 1/3 chance that we won't see inflation, but that the reason we won't see it is that the Fed hits the brakes hard, markets get very unstable, the economy skids downwards close to recession. And I think there's about a 1/3 chance that the Fed and the Treasury will get what they're hoping for and will get rapid growth, which will moderate in a non-inflationary way. But there are more risks in this moment that macroeconomic policy itself will cause grave consequences than I can remember. There have been terribly serious moments in the past, but then macroeconomic policy was trying to stabilize things. Now, there's the real risk that macroeconomic policy will be very much destabilizing things.
That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda. Let me know whether you agree with comments from Larry Summers. There he is. What's up, Larry? Or whether you agree with all the spending that has gone on in the Biden administration. Because as far as Larry Summers is concerned, inflation is a major risk going forward. Before you go, I want to ask you, please click the like button. Please subscribe, please enable notifications. I assure you both Larry Summers and President Biden have told me, they actually texted me and told me that when they watch the Ignition Time channel, they do it every day while they eat lunch. When they watch the Ignition Time channel, they click the like button, they subscribe, they enable notifications. So I would really appreciate it if you do that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.